Before we dive into this video, quickly adding here that I'm hosting ModCon this weekend and that you should totally come watch it if you enjoy any sort of CK3 content. We'll be interviewing mod developers, looking at trailers, and raising money for the World Monument Foundation. Link to the stream in the description. Thanks. I've played quite a bit of CK3 on very hard mode at this point, and I found myself dissatisfied, but didn't want to say anything about it until I could point at something and say, yes, that is the reason I don't like it. It took me a while, but I think I put my finger on it. Very hard, and by extension hard mode, for CK3 are not actually hard modes for the game. They're a different mode of play, which eliminates a critical element from the game: entropy. Entropy refers to the chaos of CK3 and is best expressed by the rise and fall of empires in the game. The most extreme of this is when a conqueror arrives on the scene, makes a big realm, dies, and their heir comes to the throne, only for the realm to dissolve. The same goes for any large empire that succumbs to a dissolution faction or a particularly painful partition succession. Entropy in Crusader Kings 3 is both challenge and opportunity. When the conqueror comes knocking, you know you're in trouble, but you know that once he is gone, there will be a new power vacuum that maybe you can fill. And if not that, then the conqueror might distract another realm that you're beefing with, alongside all kinds of other abstract effects on the game that a conqueror can have. Very hard mode just makes the AI super stable. Check out this very hard mode game I've been recording just for fun, where I'm playing an isolationist, incestuous Sardinia game. Sentences that you'd only hear in CK3. Basically, the map is covered in these big empires, most of which are not conquerors, nor were they founded by conquerors. The biggest example here is the Kyrgyz Khanate, which normally collapses with the AI in charge because it's a big empire run by a relatively low-herd nomad. When the Kyrgyz collapse, it opens up the opportunity for all kinds of other hordes to rise up in their place. But in this world, they just didn't collapse, so the steppes are a place with little entropy. This lack of entropy is killer, because realms go from being in a relatively consistent state of flux to being these sorts of entities on the map that don't provide opportunities to the player to step up. To be clear, it's not that a player needs those opportunities because without them they can't get a leg up, it's that those opportunities are stories. Telling the story of your ruler exploiting a succession crisis in the neighboring kingdom to conquer a new duchy is much more interesting than the story of your ruler stacking just the right advantage modifiers to win. Well, to be fair, either of those could be interesting if you put the right creative spin on them. CK3 is a creative game, and one where your mileage varies based on how willing you are to play the metagame of storytelling, but stories are driven in CK3 by action and reaction. The very hard AI in CK3 is like taking the canvas of freedom, that is, the game, and painting a brick onto it. The brick certainly looks scary, but you can still destroy the canvas all you want. It's just a painting, just like a normal CK3. Meanwhile, actually painting on the canvas is now much harder with this ugly-ass brick taking up so much space. Anyway, what the hell is this idiot yapping about? I'm making this video to talk about what went wrong with very hard mode and how it could be done better. I first want to talk about what even is fun in CK3 and where difficulty fits into that fun, since yes, it does have a place, even in the sandbox that is this game. There's a difference between a true sandbox, something like creative mode Minecraft, where there is absolutely no challenge whatsoever, outside of the challenge of, building whatever you want to make, and a more concrete sandbox like Mountain Blade. Minecraft's survival mode is a little more comparable to CK3 broadly, in the sense that the game puts up stuff to fight you, but it's not like the point of the game is to just beat the enemy. In Minecraft, we don't just kill zombies and say that we're beating the game. No, our goal is to also build things, just like in creative mode, but with the understanding that the game will send creepers to destroy it all the time. CK3 is exactly that. Your goal in CK3 is not anything so straightforward, aside from, I guess, building up dynasty renown. That's probably the most direct measurement of straight up progress in CK3, since across your entire family, you continuously build it up. You might call renown score if CK3 were an arcade game, but I'm getting off topic. Most people don't play CK3 just to build up renown. It's about how you get the renown, whether it's establishing a huge empire and then dying so it splits and you start making renown due to all the independent emperors, or it's abusing mystical ancestors to get more and more renown. Maybe your goal is just to get a bunch of super powerful knights and watch them destroy your enemies. Who knows? The thing is, some ways of playing are more fun than others for certain players. For example, you could get pretty much infinite prestige by just divorcing and remarrying your wife over and over again, but that's not very fun in and of itself. I think what CK3 excels in is its storytelling, while it flounders a bit in its strategic depth. It's getting better, strategically, in my opinion, but yeah, it's no EU4 or HOI4 for sure. Keeping in mind then, that fun in CK3 is more often obtained through stories than through strategy, I think it's quite obvious that the story aspect of the game takes precedent. That is not at all to say that strategy doesn't matter, and the reason why it matters is that strategy plays into story. A story is nothing without the challenges that its protagonist faces, and so the purpose of the AI opposition in CK3 is to force creative solutions to victory. Will you pursue a martial victory over your enemies? Will you murder your way into an inheritance? Will you outscale them all with stewardship, or use your immense piety to call down a crusade on the enemy, and many other possible solutions? The only reason why those ways to play exist is because they are alternative solutions to the same challenge, based on the situation that the AI is presenting to you, and that variety of ways to play is in itself the fun. Especially since the implementation of cultural traditions back when Royal Court came out, every character can find unique solutions to their problems to paint a story all their own on the canvas. But what does this have to do with Very Hard Mode? Very Hard Mode is a setting which, as I mentioned, paints a big brick right in the middle of the canvas. It does that by removing several routes to victory. Given how stable AI realms are on Very Hard, you lose the opportunity to exploit a civil war. Opportunism, in general, is not super viable already in CK3 given how quickly levies and men-at-arms regenerate, but it becomes essentially an impossibility with Very Hard Mode. So what? Just learn to paint around the brick, lil bro. And trust me, I hear you. Painting around the brick is reasonable, and maybe you enjoy only being able to draw in the corners of the canvas, but let me ask you this. If you've played CK3 on hard mode, did you feel like the challenge provided by this numerically buffed AI led to a more creative and more satisfying story and outcome? If it did, I'm happy for you. But for me, it just felt like I had to do a whole lot more waiting and play in a more reactive way instead of active. Reactive play is not always bad, but I want to point to an entirely different game as a way to demonstrate what exactly I mean. In Devil May Cry 5, and the other games in the franchise, higher difficulties never limit how well you can express yourself. In case you don't know what Devil May Cry is, it's a Netflix TV show that got turned into a video game. Trust me, bro. When you play on Dante Must Die mode, it's not like you have to be more cautious and stop using all the fun abilities you have. In fact, you start to use them more, because your cool moves in the right spots are very effective. On lower difficulties, your cool moves are still only effective in the right spots, it's just that you can make more mistakes and get away with it. That to me is the epitome of what difficulty should be. It should simply force precision, not limitation. So what is precision in CK3? It's risk-taking and decision-making. Remember what I said about opportunism before? CK3 is a game with a complicated relationship to opportunism, even with the player, but the AI is even stranger. If you're at war in CK3, it's more likely that the AI will attack you, and I don't actually know the code that makes that true, but I'm telling you, after almost 3,000 hours of CK3, it does. Failure to predict that a neighboring realm will size you up and attack you if you go to war is an example of poor precision in CK3. If you have a neighbor that's brave and has maybe 80% of your strength as an estimate, you should be aware that if you fight a neighbor of a reasonably comparable strength to you, then that brave neighbor will probably come after you. I want to point to a particularly egregious example of Very Hard Mode's poor implementation of fun difficulty. On Very Hard Mode, ransoms are worth significantly less money. With how little gold you get from ransoms on account of that, the reality is that ransoming is no longer worth doing. The mechanic is just a dead mechanic now. Some characters are, at most, worth like 100 gold on Very Hard, whereas such a character would have been worth hundreds on normal. All this does is make me not care anymore when I capture someone, except of course if I want to recruit them, which is still effective. Hilariously though, in yet another egregious debuff, your knights are half as powerful on Very Hard Mode, as their effectiveness is reduced by 50% additively, which means, yeah, it's not the same thing as half as powerful, but whatever. That reduction in knight effectiveness just makes me not as excited to capture a 20 prowess knight from the battlefield and recruit him, because he'll be significantly less useful and therefore contribute less to my story. When tools are dulled, or at times taken away, that is not making the game more fun, at least in this scenario. I want to make it super clear that, for some games, taking away active abilities from a player can be a good choice. It's not a good choice in CK3 though. In many cases with CK3, more stable, powerful realms all around me present just one option. Wait and snowball more. Wait and make more men-at-arms. Wait for the right marriage. Wait for a certain character to die. I did a whole lot of waiting in my Sardinia game, and the worst part is that the AI didn't even pounce on me very much. Some wars got declared on me here and there, but I won them all because the AI is so dumb as rocks. The AI didn't even try to target me in another way. They never came after my artifacts, or tried to assassinate my best knights. They never declared war for periphery titles that would be harder for me to defend. Now, hold your horses there though, because I just mentioned a bunch of different things out of nowhere, and this is where I want to talk more explicitly about the tools CK3 offers for success. CK3 is different from Devil May Cry, Minecraft, and many other games in that it is a symmetrical game, not visually, but in terms of the player and the opponent. Think Age of Empires or StarCraft, where a faction corresponds to maybe a culture in CK3, except the CK3 cultures are significantly less different from each other than factions in RTS games are. When a game is symmetrical, it means the two sides in opposition to each other can do everything the other can do. Before you bring up faith and culture in CK3 as asymmetries, remember that a character can change faith or culture pretty easily. The game is symmetrical in that sense, but asymmetrical in its starting positions. This is comparable to playing a fighting game with a handicap on, which is when one player has a bigger or smaller health bar. Obviously, the Byzantines and a random count have asymmetrical gameplay, but not in the sense of the tools at their disposal, only in the sense of their efficacy with those tools. The problem in CK3 is that normal and very hard share the same troglodytic understanding of the tools at their disposal. CK3's normal AI makes very little use of just about any of the mechanics in the game. It occasionally uses one of its cultural tradition features to maybe do something creative here and there. Maybe a Catholic king will send his son off to become a monk to preserve his succession, and that's about the height of CK3 AI savvy. The very hard AI is as savvy as that and no more. Now look, I enjoy making my own stories in CK3 by mostly just playing the game and letting the AI be a series of static pieces that I manipulate for my own purposes, but every once in a while, an AI does something interesting. Whether that be seducing a sibling, or making some unique culture, embracing a heresy, and so on. These sorts of occurrences are examples of effective storytelling, assuming of course they happen to characters that are relevant to the player. Of course, seducing a sibling is of a limited strategic importance, so the frequency of that probably wouldn't be too related to difficulty. Now look, you've probably figured out by now that where I'm going with this is that I want the AI to act more intelligently, but it's not because I think they need to use their resources better. You can make a CK3 AI that uses its gold optimally and builds men-at-arms more intelligently. You can make a CK3 AI that always declares war when it has a CB that it thinks it can win, but that wouldn't really fix things either. What you need is a CK3 AI that looks at its whole breadth of tools and uses them based on its personality and stats. CK3, at some points in its history, did not have a wide range of tools to make use of as a player since the game was relatively new, but today, CK3 is a game with many tools and many cool options. There's a lot that any ruler can do with the options at their disposal, and it's that breadth which can create not merely a challenging opponent but a crafty one. If I just gave every AI ruler in the game 100 stats, the game would become harder, yes, but that's not a challenge I think anyone except as a one-time novelty would enjoy. Anyway, let me not waste your time by repeating the point I believe I've already gotten pretty strongly across here. In summary, CK3 is a game with lots of creative options and the AI should use those options, but it doesn't. I want now to talk about some explicit examples of a relatively easy to implement set of AI behaviors that I think would deeply benefit CK3. I say relatively easy to implement, but I'm not sure that it would be. I'm only guessing based on my limited modding experience. If what I'm saying is totally unreasonable, then I'd be pretty sad because that means CK3 AI will probably never get any more interesting than it already is. In order to figure out how the AI should be more challenging, we should look at some effective player strategies to play the game and temper them with personality, roleplay, and the truth that the player is indeed the center of the game. That means that no, the AI shouldn't put everything it has into destroying the player, and indeed should probably deprioritize the player unless they are indeed a particularly juicy target. So first of all, we should consider which player behaviors really shouldn't be used, and those are the ones that are particularly gamey, if you know what I mean. Things like marrying your daughters to random lowborns that have high prowess is something which I'm not saying could never happen, but something which would need a particular set of cultural traditions or personality to make happen. For example, warriors by merit combined with equitable maybe, alongside a humble and ambitious ruler, could decide to marry one of his daughters to whoever has the highest prowess. In this sense, the AI can access a sort of gamey strategy at the cost of needing the roleplay context to justify it. That's just one example, and of course I don't mean to say that it should only be in that hyper-specific scenario that the AI should do something like that, but that could be an example of factors that might push the AI towards that tactic. For a simpler example, let's say you have a particularly ruthless enemy in war. A sadistic, deceitful king that clearly cannot defeat you in the war by traditional means, but doesn't want to just let you win. You know he's dangerous, so of course you put up countermeasures to prevent your own murder, not to mention murdering someone you're at war with is much harder. This ruthless king can't kill you, so instead, he'll kill different targets based on his personality. If he thinks he has a chance at winning the war, i.e. he's kind of bold, he'll try killing your highest martial courtiers who may be serving as commanders, or he'll try killing your knights who might be giving you an edge in battle. If he has no intention of winning the war, or, he's craven, and just wants to inflict pain on you, or if perhaps you two are rivals, he'll try to kill your friends, your lovers, your family, anyone that might cause you stress so that you have other things to distract you in the war. That's literally it. Again, I don't know how hard it is to get the AI to target high prowess knights of an enemy court, and I will also say, as the player, it would be kind of frustrating to lose your acclaimed knight to a plot for some outrageous king, but then again, that's why you should make sure to have a good spy master, and why your choice of knight should consider how likable that knight is too. Don't make the pagan, sadistic witch foreigner into your acclaimed knight, because he'll be so easy to get rid of for your enemies. In this sense, the challenge presented by the AI here has made the game more interesting strategically and roleplay-wise. To me, that's a win-win, although I'd want it paired with maybe the ability to seclude your knight away, like how you can seclude yourself, maybe a character interaction to offer a character to go in hiding, and based on their personality to say yes or no, but now I'm just adding new mechanics to the game, so I'll hold myself back. You see where I'm going though, right? I'm trying not to just add new mechanics to the game, because that's the lazy man's answer to balance for a game, at least in a video essay format. If I were a developer, I'd love to just add more stuff to CK3, but I'm not going to say CK3's difficulty is badly done, because if I were a coding god, I'd just do this and this and that and that. That's lame. I'm working with what the game has. Within the game's limitations, you can have an intrigue-oriented ruler kill off your knights in response to you declaring war, and it would be quite fitting in my opinion. How about another simple example? A highly diplomatic king sees that a high martial king has a claim on his title. He is worried war will be declared and he has no kids available for a quick marriage alliance. So what does he do? He immediately divorces his wife and remarries using his high diplomacy to convince the Pope to let it happen. We're assuming the king is Catholic for simplicity here. That's all there is to this one. The king divorces his wife simply because he needs a better alliance. I don't think the AI would ever do that. And again, we can tie it to the character's personality or their culture. A brave king likely would never do this, and would instead choose to just increase his men-at-arms size or something maybe. But maybe a craven king would do this divorce technique? I don't know. I don't want a vaguely smarter AI. I instead want the AI to make use of specific techniques and strategies, because the frank truth is that it's much easier to code in a particular behavior than just vaguely point and say, make it smarter. I don't know how to make the AI smarter, I just know what strategies and tactics it can use that remain within the realm of reasonable behavior and actually effectively counter human play. It's not always about even countering the player per se, it's also about making a good story, and these solutions I'm presenting, in my opinion, would contribute to better stories. Not all these ideas have to be necessarily effective tactics though. You should take into account the incompetent, the brash, the overconfident, the righteous, and so on. Now this is something which, hilariously, is more or less already in the game. Brave characters declare war more often, including against those who they have no chance to defeat. You'll be quick to note, I hope, that that's actually pretty fun, because the AI rarely declares war on the player, and even if it's a losing war, it's content, right? Imagine a lunatic character leading armies despite having zero martial, or a craven but talented ruler that won't lead his armies even if he would be good at it. Again though, some of this concept does shine through in-game, as the AI does indeed hamper itself at times on the basis of personality, but it rarely acts intelligently on account of its personality. A lot of other ideas I have would sadly require new mechanics in some way. For example, I was thinking that a high martial king could somehow channel that high martial state into unorthodox tactics that could win battles, but that concept is already abstracted as advantage in-game, so there's nothing to be done with the game's current scope. I don't know though, maybe one day we can get the Imperator Rome army tactic system in this game. That system is kind of flawed in my opinion, but something akin to it could be a good fit for CK3, especially if there are enough tactics that the way a commander fights could be influenced by their traits. I believe CK2 actually had stuff like this, but in a very limited capacity. I distinctly remember there being a CK2 tactic that involves the commander having a stutter, and thus having his orders misunderstood, which I think is a really small but cool addition. Once again though, I am falling into the trap of adding new mechanics. Whatever. I'm sure there are more things, but I'm more trying to give you an archetype of behaviors rather than a ton of particular ones. Remember, the AI strategy should be effective but not oppressive, and should be limited by somewhat predictable character archetypes that make sense.
Sadistic characters do mean things, and honorable brave characters make rash decisions, perhaps unwise ones. I think it can be simplified into two sorts of tracks. The competence track, determined by pure stats, and the personality track, self-explanatory. The competence track is just based on what stats the character is good at, particularly their education, given how important perks can be. Good at martial? Look for martial strategies. Good at intrigue? Look for intrigue strategies. A character who is trying to use a particular strategy may execute it poorly if they have bad stats, simply because of how the game works. If you have low intrigue, it's harder to assassinate people, among other examples. Where personality comes in is as a lesser influence on strategies, in the sense that martial strategies is quite a broad concept, but brave martial strategies is a bit more refined. I say lesser, but what I mean more is that competence more directly determines will this character even be good at trying these things, but personality determines if they'll even pursue that strategy at all. It's entirely possible to have a character who is quite skilled at intrigue, but doesn't have the stomach to handle assassinating someone. A character who might otherwise be talented but is limited by their own personal failures. This can get as complicated as Dwarf Fortress, of course, but let's not take it there. Let's instead just broadly say that characters normally pursue strategies that align with their competences, but may block off particular strategies based on their personality. Personality also determines what the character pursues. Are they interested in personal prestige, family lineage, securing lots of gold, making a big realm? We top both tracks off with just a little bit of RNG. Yeah, I know, randomness in strategy games is bad. Wah, cry some more. RNG is what keeps games like CK3 alive, and if the AI was perfectly predictable off of their stats and personality, it wouldn't be very fun after a few playthroughs. So that's my formula. It's nothing revolutionary, it's just an expansion on some principles that are already in the game. Now, if I understand AI programming in CK3 to some extent, then all this entails is the painstakingly slow process of adding weights to everything, with triggers for their particular stats and personality requirements alongside adding decision-making weight for certain actions. Remember when I mentioned assassinating high prowess knights? Well, we'd have to go into the code for the murder scheme and set the AI to favor doing it if they have a certain alignment of their competence and personality, and if the target has enough prowess and is from a country that's at war with them. My immediate thought is that we could divide segments of the intersections on the competence and personality tracks to make archetypes and then smush them into flags for a character that mark them as acting in a certain way. But the game kinda already does that. Essentially, much of the legwork is already done, except that system only accounts for personality and not really at all for competence. That's why you'll have characters that have no business trying to do murder schemes just go for them, simply because they are sadistic. A sadistic character, who is good at martial, should not be trying to assassinate people. They should be raiding or going to war looking for characters to torture. Do you see what I mean? Expand the archetypes and make them more impactful. A vengeful zealot should really be going to war a lot more and really putting all their effort into fighting heretics and heathens, and yet, instead, we just see the AI go from declaring 0 wars to declaring like 1 every 50 years maybe. I'm exaggerating, it's not that bad. But I think if you play CK3, you know through experience what I mean. Does anyone ever look at those personality types beyond for a little laugh or to enhance some roleplay? No, they don't, because those archetypes have almost no bearing on gameplay in a real sense. In fact, I'd even call them a new player trap, given new players will waste their effort on thinking that those things matter and waste brain space on considering the personality of their enemies. All that matters is boldness, because that determines if they'll go to prison willingly or not. Everything else is basically pointless. Again, not actually pointless, just less pointful than they should be. Or rather, not pointful in the right ways, maybe. There's a million ways to put it, but that doesn't matter. How this all ties into difficulty is that on hard mode, or very hard mode, in this theoretical system I've concocted, the AI would just make decisions that better align with its competence track, and more aggressively pursue effective tactics despite their personality. Would a lazy character take the time to declare wars? On normal mode, maybe laziness prevails, but on very hard mode, it's less likely for ineffective tactics to prevail due to RNG or personality. Does that make sense? Difficulty is the metric that measures how much pressure the player, or in a narrative format, their protagonist, is under. For some stories, too much pressure just kills it, so set it to normal, but for others, a lot of pressure creates more intensity and higher stakes, so use hard mode. What I'm hoping for is that you come away from this video with a greater sense of difficulty and its nature in Crusader Kings 3, and that you might be able to present your thoughts on the topic to others. I would never expect Paradox to revamp the AI in any meaningful way given how shoddily the AI is handled in this game, but if someone ever asks you why very hard isn't a good setting, I hope you feel better equipped to explain that difficulty in CK3 is not numbers. It's about stories, just how everything is in CK3. It's always about telling the best story possible, and harder difficulties should allow the AI to simply put more pressure on the protagonist of the story, the player. Thank you for your time.